everyone. I'll be covering the entire AP Microeconomics course through my videos. And today I'll start with Unit 1, which is the basic economic concepts, right? But before we dig into, AP Microeconomics, the entire course, I just want to give you a snapshot of the course, all right? So just give me a minute. All right. Okay, so the course is like this, right? You have 6 units in AP Microeconomics course, the basic economic concepts, supply and demand, production cost, and the perfect competition model, imperfect competition, factor markets, market failure, and the role of government. And these are the one, two, three, four big ideas that we cover through these 6 units. All right. So each unit would be covering some or the other big idea. All right. And then the AP test that you will be having will be of this uh, type. So it will have MCQs, 60 MCQs, and 3 free response questions, one long and 2 short. Right. So MCQs 70 minutes would be given to you, and for free response, 60 minutes would be given to you. All right. And then today I'll start with this unit 1 as basic economic concepts. The exam weighting is this much, and you can expect multiple choice of around 20 questions from this and free response short questions, 2 questions, 2 short questions, right? And that's the unit at a glance. So you have scarcity, resource allocation, and economic concepts, production possibility curve, comparative advantage in trade, cost benefit analysis, marginal analysis, and consumer choice. These are the subtopics or in unit 1 that we will be covering. Not all today, but yes, we'll be covering all, right? Okay, so I'll start with the first two today, scarcity and resource allocations and economic systems. Okay. All right. So before we go into this, right, first of all, let's just understand since we are doing economics, right? So let's just understand what do you understand by economics? All right. What do we understand by economics? So economics is basically a study of, right? So it's a study of how society manages, right? It's scarce resources. Now that's very important, right? That's a very, very important word. Scarce resources, how a society basically manages its scarce resources most optimally, right? That is to the full potential, right? To the maximum potential of the resource. So how does it manages its scarce resources to produce goods and services? So to produce goods and services, and then finally to distribute them among its people or society. So basically, economics is a study of how society manages its scarce resources most optimally to produce goods and services and to distribute them among its people. That's what economics is all about, right? Now, in this, we'll be doing, will be, economics is a very vast field, right? So it has various branches. But yes, most of it, I mean, economics we can divide broadly, economics, all right. So we can divide broadly into 2 categories. One is micro and the other is macroeconomics, right? Micro is basically when we study the behavior of individuals, right, for different goods and services and determine the prices and quantities of goods and services through the interaction of individuals in these markets. In very simple language, you can say that this I, right, that's my own what do I call it? So that's my own interpretation, right? This I is for individuals. So whenever we study about individuals, right? Whenever we study about a firm, whether when we study about an industry, right? When we study at the grassroots level, right? That's where we are studying about microeconomics. That's what microeconomics is all about. All right. We are studying basically the behavior of individual firms, individual consumers, individual industry, and how the prices are determined through the demand and supply forces. All those things are your microeconomics. However, when we understand economy as a whole, right? So understanding economy as a whole, right, is what your macro is. Now, the A here, I basically, make that as stands for aggregation. So aggregating, summing up the entire economy. So when you sum up all the individuals, when you sum up all the firms, when you sum up all the industries in the economy, and we study about that, I mean, the impact on the entire economy of any policy decision, of any government action taken, or any action taken by one industry on the other, right? All that is your macro. So when we study about, let's say, the total output, all right, when we study about, let's say, what's the unemployment rate in the country, all right, when we study about, let's say, what's the inflation in the country. So all these, they impact the entire economy, right? That's when we are saying that we study macroeconomics. All right. Okay. Then we come to another term which is actually very important in economics, and that is your resource. So, what do you understand by a resource? What is a resource? What do you understand by a resource? A resource is anything useful. I mean, very simple language, right? A resource is anything useful. All right. Now, in economics, so anything that can be used is a resource, right? In economics, what we have done is that we have classified these resources under the title of what we call as factors of production. All right. Anything that's useful is a resource, right? But then in economics, we have just classified these resources, all kinds of resources, under the title of factors of production. And we have categorized them under four main categories. All right. One, you have land, then you have labor. So, in land, we cover everything, all the natural resources, your air, water, land, soil, everything is covered under your land. Your labor is basically, the human capital that we have, right? Then the capital that we talk of here, the third factor of production is the capital. We talk mainly about the physical capital, right? So basically, machinery, equipments, tools, right? Factories, that's what we call it, right? So that's what your capital is. And the fourth one is basically your entrepreneurship. Fourth one is your entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is basically, a skill that someone has in order to club all these resources together. So, clubbing all these resources together and the ability to take the risk, right? Anyone who is possessing that skill is an entrepreneur. So, that skill basically, right, that intellect is basically what we call as entrepreneurship. All right. So this is what your resource is. Now let's jump into what is actually scarcity. All right. So what do you understand by scarcity? Okay. Okay. All right. So what do you understand by scarcity? Scarcity is something that's not enough of something, right? Is scarcity. in a very layman's language. Scarcity is not enough of something, not enough of labor, not enough of water, not enough of input, not enough of education, not enough of medication, not enough of, let's say, technology. So anything that's not enough, right, is scarce, right? That's how we define scarcity. And why do we have this scarcity? Why do we have this scarcity, right? We have this scarcity because we have unlimited wants. That's what the whole concept of scarcity revolves around. We have unlimited wants, but limited resources. So we have unlimited wants but limited resources, and this gives rise to scarcity. This basically gives rise to your scarcity problem. Because we have unlimited wants, we want everything, right? But the limited, we have resources being limited. Very simple example, I have my limited budget, my pocket money, let's say $100, right? But then I want to go for shopping, I want to spend it on eatables, I want to watch a theater, I want to go for traveling, but then my resource, which is my income, is very limited. Now, resources can also be like intangible thing, like time. Even time is a resource, and that's also limited. So if let's say if I have limited time. I have only 4 hours, right? And in those 4 hours, I have to do several things, right? So let's say I have to go for shopping, I have to watch theater, I have to pick up, let's say, my friend. So it's like only limited time, but then I have too many things to do. All right. So that's scarce. But the time that I have is scarce. So anything that's limited, I mean, scarcity arises because of this concept of unlimited wants but limited resources. That's what you have to understand. That's important. All right. This one is important. I always mark my important with these stars. So just for future reference. All right. Okay. Now this scarcity leads to what? So if things are scarce, this leads to what? Right? If I have scarcity in terms of time, I have scarcity in terms of income, what will I do? I will I will actually make economic choices, right? I will actually make economic choices. So this scarcity leads to what we call in economics as economic choices, right? I will actually make economic choices. Economic choices basically meaning I'll do a trade-off. So, taking my earlier example, if I have just 4 hours, right, and I have to go for shopping as well as I have to go for watching a movie, let's say, then I will do some kind of trade off because I have limited number of hours with me, but I have to do both the things, let's say. Either I'll go only for shopping and not for movie, I'll sacrifice the movie, or I will actually go for a movie and sacrifice my shopping. Or maybe I'll divide my hours, sorry, among both the activities that I want to do, if that's possible. So I will do some kind of a trade off. So that leads to economic choices, right? I'm making an economic choice based on that scarcity. Okay. And this, what is this trade off basically? So, what is this trade off? Right? What is this trade off? This trade off is what we call in economics as the opportunity cost. Another very important concept in economics, and this will keep coming up again and again. So, I'm telling you in advance, this is what we call as opportunity cost. All right. Opportunity cost is basically your giving up, giving up something in return of something else. That's your opportunity cost. So I'll write it that down, right? Okay. So opportunity cost is giving up something in return of something else, right? So it's basically, it's, in different books you will also find like your the next best alternative that you are sacrificing, next best alternative that you are sacrificing is your opportunity cost. So, going back to the examples, let's say, okay, so what is, if I ask you, you all would be attending college. So, what is the opportunity cost of attending college? An opportunity cost of attending college would be, different for each student. Some would say that, the opportunity cost for me is sacrificing work experience. So, you are sacrificing work experience. Others would say it would be, let's say, the leisure time, right? The leisure activities, or let, let me put it that way. So these are basically your opportunity cost of attending the college. Because if you're attending college, you are basically sacrificing these activities, or you are sacrificing these alternatives. So that's the next best alternative that you are sacrificing. All right. That's the opportunity cost. Okay, so if I go back to my example of movie and shopping, if I'm going for the opportunity cost of shopping is the time that I will actually sacrifice for going to movie, or the, or maybe the satisfaction that would have I would have attained by watching a movie, that I'm sacrificing. So that's the opportunity cost of going for shopping. All right. Okay, now this is how basically the big idea that I want to actually put forward from here is that this is what this is the, I mean, scarcity and choice. Scarcity and choice are central to the study of economics. So these two things are central to the study of economics. All right. That's why in unit one, we start with scarcity. So you should understand that, the basic problem that we are studying in economics is of scarcity and making choices. So they are the central to the study of economics. All right. Okay. Another idea, that's related to scarcity and that I really want to take up is scarcity and rival. So I want to take up this idea as well. This is These two ideas are very closely related, scarcity and rivalry. Okay. Scarcity and rivalry. Scarcity basically means that you have limited resources and unlimited wants. Rivalry. Rivalry basically means that multiple parties competing for something, right? So it basically means rivalry arises when actually multiple parties are competing for something. Okay, so it basically says that, a rival good is a good. A rival good is a good that if one person consumes it, then it limits the ability for the others to use simultaneously, right? So if a rival good is described as if if one person consumes it, right? So if one person is consuming it, one person consumes a good, right? Consumes a good, it limits the ability for the others to use simultaneously, right? That's what a rival good is. So if I'm consuming an apple, that limits the ability of the other person to consume it, right? That's rival good. And scarcity is this, your limited resources and your unlimited ones. All right. So let's see how are they related, right? How these two ideas are related to each other. So I'll take a very simple example. Let's say I'll take an example for a scarce and a rival good. Okay, very simple example I would take. Example, let's say a cake in a classroom. Okay. So I have just single cake, right? One cake, that's a scarce good. So one cake, it's a scarce good, right? And I have in a classroom, let's say I have 40 students. Okay, the classroom has 40 students. One cake that's scarce. Now, if obviously two students consume it, then less is available to the others. That's rival good as well. So, scarcity and rivalry are actually very related ideas. All right. And then, so economists they have done, they have created a kind of spectrum on this, right? To explain it more nicely, you can say. Okay. All right. So I have the spectrum of how rival good a good is. So I have the spectrum of how rival a good is. Let's say here on one extreme, I have a good which is extremely rival. So it's a rival good. Okay. Then let's say, the example, and on the other, first of all, on the other end, I will have a good which is non-rival in nature. Okay, it's a non-rival. Okay, example for a rival good could be your housing. Example for a rival good could be your land. All right. Okay. Example for a non-rival good, right? So perfect non-rival good, I would say they are very, very few, right? Uh, okay, you can say that, air, the open air that we have, all right, that's a very close to non-rival good, a perfect example of non-rival good, all right. Then in between this spectrum, I will have different categories of, your rival goods. So let's say this is one extreme of rival good. Another one, right, a less rival good, right, could be your oxygen, let's say oxygen in airtight room. Okay, so we have an airtight room, let's say about 20 people are there, but the oxygen out there is limited, right? So it's scarce. And yes, if one consumes more, then it's less available for the other. So it's a rival good, right? This kind of a situation is can be termed as, scarcity and rivalry both together, right? But yes, it's less as compared to the pure form of a rival good. All right. Then let's say we could have another one saying, roads during rush hour. So yes, everyone is fighting for, its own piece of road in order to drive on it. So during the rush hour, it's really a scarcity and a rival good, right? The less would be, let's say, roads at 3 a.m. in the morning, right? the roads are pretty, deserted, right? So yes, you can freely actually drive on the roads. Then very close to, your non-rival good could be, let's say, your water. All right. So even air is not a very perfect example of a non-rival good. It's not a pure example of a non-rival good, right? But yes, still we can say that. Or I can also club this air under this, which is very close to non-rival good. Okay, so it could be water, it could be air, right? All these are basically examples of non-rival goods, not the perfect, but yes, very, very close to your non-rival goods. All right. So that's your, so the basic idea now from this, what we have is, so we think about, right, how we allocate these scarce and rival goods among various parties in the sense among the consumers, among the producers. How do we actually allocate these resources, these scarce and rival resources among various components of the economy? That's the whole idea. That's the big picture or the big idea I want to put forward through this scarcity and rivalry idea. All right. Okay. Then from this, we come to that, okay, we know that, now resources are scarce and we have to make economic choices. And economic choices lead us to making some trade off, right? We do make some trades off. So, how basically now these scarce resources are allocated and how final goods and services are distributed is what our next topic would be. So basically, how do we how do we allocate how do we allocate scarce resources and distribute final goods and services in the economy? This brings us this particular question brings us to the three basic economic problems for any economy. Three basic economic problems, right? First one, what to produce. So whether we should produce more of apples or whether we should produce more of laptops, right? Then how to produce. So whether we should use more labor intensive technology or whether we should use more of capital intensive technology. All right. And the third one being that for whom to produce, for whom to produce, right? Basically saying that how the distribution should be done, how to distribute the final the f- how to distribute the final goods and services, how to distribute the final goods and services, basically who gets more, who gets less, who gets what, who gets more, and who gets less. So these are the three basic economic problems that we have to solve, all right, in economics. And these economic problems basically arise because we have to allocate our scarce resources because of the problem of scarcity and then distribute them among our final goods and services. Since the resources are scarce, we have to make economic choices, we have to make the trade offs, and that is why we have these three basic economic problems: what to be produced, how to produce, and for whom to produce, or how the distribution should be done. Now, these basic economic problems are resolved differently among, I mean, they are resolved differently, or they are um, they are resolved differently with different economic systems, right? They're, I mean, the way they are resolved, these three basic economic problems, the way they are resolved depends upon what economic system is actually working in that economy, in a particular economy. So this actually, these three basic economic problems brings us to our next topic, which we call as economic systems, right? So I'm just trying to establish a connection between what I am doing with you. So we started with, okay, what's basic economics, then what's economics has two major branches, then all right, what's a resource, and then we started with scarcity. Now the scarcity is basically the central idea of the study of economics. Now, that scarcity leads us to making economic choices. From those economic choices, we come to these three basic economic problems. And then from these basic economic problems, we come to the economic systems. Because the way they are resolved, these three basic economic problems depend upon what economic system is working in a particular economy. All right. So, what is actually an economic system, right? First, let's answer that. Try to answer this. What is an economic system? So, a system, right? Let me just first understand what a system out here is. So, a system is, or any economic system is basically, it's any system of allocating scarce resources. All right. So economic systems are basically any system that you take, right? System basically, the administrative system, um, the judiciary system and the executive system. So all these systems together, right? Any system that helps in allocating scarce resources is your economic system. Okay. Now, in economics, in this AP Microeconomics, basically we study about three major economic systems. Okay. All right. So we have three major economic systems that we have to study in AP Micro. The first is your command economy. The second is your market economy. And the third is your mixed economy. All right. So in economics, we study these three major economic systems. It's any system of allocating those scarce resources. All right. Let's understand what's a command economy. Right. So I'll be discussing about the purest form of command economy. All right. A very close example of a command economy, right? I can say Russia. All right. In economics, how do we define a command economy? A command economy is defined by, where everything is controlled by the government. So government basically controls the factors of production, FOP. That's what I'll write for factors of production. So it's the government that controls the factors of production. That's a purest form, right, of a command economy. So I'm talking about in pure form, right? In pure form. It's basically the government that controls the factors of production. So it's the government that has all the property rights. So all the property rights, all the property rights are with the government. All right. It's the government that decides what to be produced. Government decides basically what to be produced, decides what, how, and for whom to be produced. All three decisions are taken by the government. So it's the government that will decide whether to produce, it's the government that will decide whether to produce 10,000 cars or maybe, 10 million apples. It's the government who will decide whether it should be more labor intensive, whether I should use more of labor, or whether I should use more of capital. It's the government who will decide that who gets what, right? How this distribution is to be done. That's again, I'm repeating, the command economy that I'm talking about is in the pure form, right? That's what the command economy is. Now, in this setup, in this economic system, two things basically: fairness and equitable distribution, right, of resources. These are, you can say, are achieved in this system. All right. However, what is not there in the system are so no incentives and innovations. Any kind of innovation, if it has to be taken, it will be taken only by the government, right? For the private, for the people or for the producers, for the firms, there are no incentives as such because everything is undertaken by the government, and so there are no innovations by them, right? Nobody actually take any kind of effort to do any kind of innovation because there are no incentives attached to it. All right. But yes, what we can see in this system are fairness and equitable distribution of resources or income, more equitable distribution of resources and income as compared to other systems, because it's the government that takes care of the people. All right. Okay. Coming to the market economy. All right. The second type of economic system. Okay. And we have market economy. That's the second kind of economic system. Again, it's in the pure form that I will talk of. And the closest example I could think of is your USA. All right. Here, the factories are independent of the government, right? So here, the factories or the producers or the owners are, the firms are independent of the government, independent of the government. Right, there's private ownership of resources established through property rights. So there is private ownership of the resources, private ownership of the resources established through property rights. All right. And so it's basically, it's the market that decides, what to be produced, how to be produced, and for whom to be produced. That is how the distribution will be done or who gets what. All right. So if you can, and in this, you can also have competing factories, right? So if there is a factory, if let's say a market needs 5,000 cars plus 2,000 trucks, then it will be produced by the owners, right? By the firms. So it's the market. It's basically the demand and the supply forces that will decide what to be produced and at what price it should be traded in the market. All right. So it's basically there is private ownership of your resources. So if there's a farmer, the farmer will decide if there's a demand for wheat in the market, the farmer will decide, all right, I'll produce wheat. If there's demand for soya bean in the market or lentils in the market, he will decide, all right, or she will decide, all right, I will produce this. The government is not there to dictate, right? It's the private ownership of, of the individual to decide what to be produced, how to be produced, and I mean, whether I should use more of labor or whether I should use more of capital. Everything is decided by the individual. All right. Who gets what is also determined by the market. We all know about it, right? So it's basically the price, right? It's basically the price that determines who gets what. So price plays a very important role. It's everything is determined by the price. In fact, all the three basic economic problems are solved by price signals only, right? So it's all the demand and supply forces, and when they interact, we set a price, there's a price. All that's what, basically, that's the basic thing that actually helps in resolving all the three economic problems in a market economy. All right. However, it's not that there is no government intervention. There is government intervention, right? But yes, if I talk of very pure, it will not be there. But yes, there is some government intervention, and the government intervention could be in the areas like even in US is there in health, army, right? Strategic areas, basically. All right. Now, two things that we can expect in this economy, right, are incentives and innovations. Since everything is price based, right? What to be produced, how to be produced, everything is price based. There are incentives, for the producers that if they actually earn profits, they can actually sell more. So there's an incentive. So that incentive helps them to innovate things, right? So that they can, let's say, reduce their cost of production and earn higher profits. So yes, these two things which were absent in your command economy are very much present in a market economy: incentives and innovation. All right. But yes, the two things that were there in the command economy might be a little less prevalent in the market economy. And those two things are basically your fairness and equity. Because everything is profit oriented, everything is done on the basis of price. So, yes, there could be less fairness and less equitable distribution of income in this kind of an economy. All right. Okay, telling you practically every economy. Okay. All right. Before that, okay, let me introduce the third economy as well. Then we have something which we call as mixed economy. Now, mixed economy has tried to it has tried to take, both the advantages of both kinds of economy, the command economy as well as the market economy, right? So it's a very close example to mixed economy that I can think of in terms of country is India. All right, it has a mixed economy, that is, it has what we call as public private partnership, right? It basically means that, a part is actually controlled by the government and a part is actually open for the private ownership as well. So there are few areas which are actually open for the private, ownership. That is, you produce the way you want, you use the technology the way you want, but then the government is there to supervise or maybe to just keep a check, and some sectors are still under the government control. All right. This is what we call as mixed economy. So if I give you a spectrum, right, a very, very pure form of command economy is on one side, and a very pure form of a market economy would be at the other extreme. And somewhere middle, you will have what we call as mixed economy. All right. But practically speaking, every economy is a mixed economy. right? Even if I talk of Russia, even if I talk of USA, every economy is a mixed economy. What differs is basically the percentage, right? So in the market economy, the influence of the government would be very, very less, maybe, 5 to 10%, and the rest 90% will be with the market forces. In a command economy, it's just the opposite. Maybe 95 is controlled by the government and 5% is left for the market, right? And somewhere in between, you will have mixed economy. So these are your three types of economic systems that are there in economics for you to study. All right. Now, one term that I've been using in these economic systems, right, is, you must have noticed, is property rights. Okay, let's understand. It's a very important term actually, and it's very much there. It serves as a basis for your market economy as well. All right. So, what do you understand by property rights? Okay. Property rights are basically exclusive authority. So, these are exclusive authority to own and use resources. Okay. And anything made from those resources. Okay, so property rights are basically exclusive authority that you have to own and use your resource and anything made from those resource. These are like basically the rules of a game, right? Such as, like, let's say hide and seek. So if the rules are set, if you know the rules, then it's easy for the players to actually focus on playing their best and having fun. That's what property rights are. Now, the purpose of property rights is to eliminate destructive competition for control of economic resources. That's what, right? That's why property rights are so important. Okay. The purpose is basically so that there is a fair playing, in fair playing in the market, right? And there's no destructive competition, right, in the market. Now, a well defined and well protected property rights basically replace competition by violence with competition by peaceful means. Okay, so the property rights, if they are well defined, right, and well protected, then basically your competition would be, on will be by peaceful means rather than by violence. Right. Let's understand a bit, I'll give you example actually. I'll explain it through example. What are property rights? Okay. So let's say there are let's say there's a house, right? Let's say there's a house and this person actually wants to sell this house. Okay. All right. Now, if so, I'm taking two situations. The first situation, I take that property rights, PR, right, are well defined. Okay, PR well defined. So this is person A, and this person wants to sell this house. All right, and let's say I'm the buyer out here. So everything was well defined. He had all the documents and his property rights that person A, Mr. A, owns this house, and blah blah blah. Was everything very good? Well written, well defined, and well protected property rights. So I as a buyer, would not hesitate to buy this house, right? Okay. However, if the case would have been, that's the first case. Now, if the case would have been that the property rights are not well defined, all right, that is, the documents that Mr. A has there are some, let's say, loopholes in that document. Or let's say, another Mr. B comes in and says that, oh, this house belongs to me. Then another person, Mr. C, comes and say that, oh, this house belongs to me as well. Then, as a buyer, I would be reluctant, or I would be in a dilemma whether to buy this house or not. So I might not buy the house at all. All right. Now, this entire setup, right, where the property rights were not well defined, it actually leads to what we call as market failure, because the transaction could not take place because the property rights were not well defined. So it leads to what we call as market failure. So that is why I was stressing on the point that property rights, which are well defined and well protected, are a crucial part, especially of a market economy where everything is actually um, you know mm, attained with the help of prices. All right. Now, three dimensions of PR, you can say, are the first one, that it's exclusive. All right. Your property rights are exclusive. It should be, to that one person only. And second, they are enforceable. Okay, they are enforceable, meaning that if someone is intruding into your property, you can actually call the police. So they are enforceable. And the third is that they are transferable. All right. These are the three dimensions of your property rights that you should understand. Okay. All right. Okay. Now from this, we come to another, um, what do I call it? Another subtopic, right? Which is positive and normative statements. Okay. So up till now, all right, we have actually covered your scarcity leading to the big picture, right? The scarcity leading to economic choices, leading to the trade-offs. And then because of that scarcity, we have those three basic economic problems: what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce. And that brings us to the three economic systems, whether we should how these three basic economics are problems are resolved depends upon what economic system is prevailing in an economy, in a country. And in that we have your command economy, your market economy, and your mixed economy. And related to all the three economies, all the three types of economic systems, we have a term which we call as property rights. That's important. All right. Now, this is entirely a new topic which we call as positive and normative statements. All right. So I'll go for the positive statements. Now, positive statements in economics are basically, they are statements about, what is or what was. They are statements where we say that, these are the statements that are about matters of facts. All right. So these are the statements that are about matters of fact. Okay, these statements can be tested. All right. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I say higher interest rates cause people to save more. Now, this is a positive statement. I can actually test this statement, and I am saying this is a tested and a verified statement. And even if it's not, I can actually test this statement that higher interest rates cause people to save more. or higher taxes on cigarettes discourage smoking. Now, this again is a matter of fact. I have tested it. All right. So, a positive statement is a statement which basically gives you, or is related to or is all about matters of fact. These statements can be tested. Okay. On the other hand, a normative statement is a statement that's based on or depend on value judgment. All right. These are the statements that involved issues of personal opinion. Okay, which cannot be tested or settled by sources or settled by recourse to facts. All right, so if I say that people should save more, right, if I'm saying, example being, let's say people should save more. Now this is my opinion, right? This is something my personal opinion is, this is my value judgment, right? It might not be true also. So that's a normative statement. Or if I say smoking should be discouraged. So that's again, that's a normative statement. That's a personal opinion I have, right? However, both these statements, why so basic now the basic question arises, why are we studying these kinds of statements in economics, right? Both these statements, for the positive and normative, have what we call as policy implications. Okay, they both have policy implications. That is why we basically study these statements. They both have positive implications. A positive statement, a positive statement will basically tell us, it helps the policymakers to make informed decisions. It helps the policymakers to make informed decisions. So, like, it so a positive statement would be, okay, relationship between interest rates and investments. So we know that as interest rates go up, as interest rates go up, as interest rates go up, investments go down. All right. Now, with this positive statement, this is a tested one. Policymakers, they can actually make informed decisions. If they want to decrease the investment in the economy, they can actually increase the interest rates in the economy. All right. A normative statement, a normative statement basically helps the policymaker in making or policy recommendations. They help in making policy recommendations. So let's say if I say that the government should should increase its spending on education because that will actually help the economy grow better. Now, that's a positive statement. So the government might think, that's a policy recommendation I am kind of giving, right? So both these statements, they have their own policy implications for the policymakers in a country. Positive statements, they basically help in making informed decisions, and normative statements help in, policy recommendations to the policymakers. All right. Then we come to a topic which is very simple and which is actually the last topic for today, and that is economic models. Okay, now what is actually economic model is, right? So we have a very complex world, right? There are various, you know, impact and what do I call repercussions of one action on the other, on several others actually, if I want to say like that, right? So we are living in a very complex world, right? And it's very difficult actually to understand it in this form, in this complex form, right? So in economics, what we do, we simplify this by taking assumptions. In economics, what we do, we simplify this complex model. This is a very, very complex model to understand and study, right? It's a complex world. So, in order to understand this complex world, in economics, we take or we simplify it by taking assumptions, right? So, like we say that all consumers are rational, all consumers have perfect knowledge, and there's one term that we use as citrus paribus, which means other things remaining constant. So we have these assumptions that are taken in economics in order to study the complex world. All right. This a set of assumptions that we take, right? So, like, you know, a set of assumptions that we take and use it, use to analyze human behavior and predict outcome is what an economic model is. So it's basically there's a complex world, right? We cannot understand the complex world like this. So we actually simplify the complex world by taking a set of assumptions. And then with that set of assumptions, we actually make a model and use that model to basically analyze human behavior and predict outcome. That's what we term as an economic model. So, a very simple example that I would actually give you for this is when we will be actually studying right further down the course, when we'll be studying demand and supply, let's say. So, that's my demand and that's my supply. I say that citrus parables, right? Citrus paribus, that is, other things remaining constant. Otherwise, your demand and supply both are actually affected by lots and lots of other factors. But in order to understand the relationship between the two, right, I keep this as a very, very strong assumption. Citrus paribus, all the other factors remaining constant. How does the price basically affects your demand and supply? Okay. Now, this is what I would term as an economic model. All right. Okay. That's what your economic model is all about. Okay. So, with this, I'll stop today. And I have actually covered, to just let you know, I have covered unit 1.1, that's scarcity. I'll go back to my this glance, right? So I've covered the scarcity, I've covered the resource allocations and economic systems. In my next video, I'll start with the production possibility curve. But before that, I would like to give you 5 very simple MCQs on this unit. So you can actually see from my screen. Okay, this is the first one. Which of the following best describes what we mean by resources in economics? You have 5 choices, and please try to attempt these 5 MCQs. I'll discuss the answers in my next video. All right, that's the first question. The second question is this: what does it mean to say that a resource is scarce? Third is, which of the following would best be described as a positive statement? Fourth is, what are the 4 categories of resources? And fifth is, what is necessary for the effective functioning of a market system? All right. I'll stop here. See you next time in my next video with production possibility curve. Thank you. Bye bye.